Hey gang, it's Mary Rose here. It's Wednesday at 1 p.m. Pacific time. I'm so glad to see you, and I hope you can see and hear me. I want to invite anyone who's watching on Facebook to go do the little thing, going to streamyard.com/Facebook that gives permission to show your name. This is a live stream. You are all here live. I can see you in the comments already, which is awesome. This is a great interactive conversation, and we have an excellent topic today. I think it's one that many of you are going to be wanting to take notes on. So you might want to just get together your little pencils and, places to scribble on. Our topic is this. We are going to discuss writing the inner life of your characters in fiction. And I say characters, but chances are the inner life of one special character, your protagonist, your hero, is the one that you're most concerned about writing, as well you should be. We are often advised to get close to our characters, to write from an intimate place of knowing them, to share their thoughts and feelings, to delineate their character arc, to show the reader how they transform over the course of our books. But this makes us think that we need to spend a lot of time inside their heads, and perhaps we do. But as you know, if you've got some writing mileage on you, once you get inside your main character's head, it's not always clear what exactly you're supposed to do in there. It seems to all of a sudden create a little tangle of contradictions between other writing advice we may have gotten. Like, for example, we're supposed to show, not tell. But once you're trapped in somebody's train of thought, what can you do but tell? Writers get kind of flustered immediately when they realize this conundrum. Another thing that we know that we're supposed to do as writers is move the storytelling forward, move the story forward. But how can we move the story forward when we're kind of locked in a closet made of bone? Right? So it's complicated. It's not self-evident. And I'm going to argue today that I think it's one of the reasons that writers, particularly those writing in the third person, continually resist the advice to get closer, to write in a close third person, to stick pretty near to the experience of their main character. They find themselves wandering in all kinds of directions away from where the real business of the storytelling is, but it's for good reason. It's because it's not self-evident what to do once we get inside the cranium of your character. So that's our topic today, and I hope that you're excited about it. I'm going to be very practical because I know how confusing this topic is. So you're going to get from me today, stick around, 5 things not to do when you are writing the inner life of your viewpoint character, and then followed by, hard upon, 5 things that you should be doing when you're writing the inner life of your character. Okay, so that is the plan today. And I want to take a moment before we jump in to say hi to the folks that are here who are already posting in the comments. Waving hi to Anne. Always a treat to have you here. Hillary, I love to have you here as well. Nancy, hello. Cynthia, hello. So as you see, we've got a bunch of folks here live. There are others who haven't posted comments yet. It's only fair that I let you all know who I am as well. I'm Mary Rose Wood. I'm an author. I go live on YouTube nearly every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Pacific time to talk about story structure, writing craft, and the mindset of the working writer. I know from my own long experience as a writer of the types of things that writers get in a tizzy about, and I think today's topic is definitely one of them. And I also wanted to share with you that I'm the founder of Path of the Storyteller, which is my own platform for training, mentoring writers, and it's a wonderful community. A lot of the folks that come to these live streams are part of it. If you're not part of it yet, don't worry. Someday you will be. And in fact, if you're watching this video, I consider you part of the Path of the Storyteller community. I want to get you a little present before we move on. I made a freebie, which is a collection of writing prompts, and it's called Brainstorm Your Book in 30 Days. I'm going to put a link up for you. Before we get into our topic today, why don't you note this URL? It's www www.pathofthestoryteller.com/challenge. And I particularly want you to take advantage of this free workbook, because I know that a lot of folks are already thinking ahead to NaNoWriMo. And I strongly recommend that you go through the 30 writing prompts in this workbook. It's 30 writing prompts in 30 days that are designed to help you literally brainstorm your book from beginning through the middle to the end, and come up with the not just random content, but the exact type of material that you are going to need to actually have a well-structured story. And I know from long experience and working with so many writers that story structure is the thing that people keep getting tripped up about. So I know that this freebie is going to help you out a lot. So please take advantage of it. All right, are you guys ready to dive in to our topic? How to write the inner life of our characters? I have to say, just as I was getting ready to go live, those of you who know me in real life, or my students who see me a lot on our gatherings and, sort of weekly coaching sessions, that I've recently started to play pickleball regularly. And I made a pickleball connection in my mind. And I just want to share it because I know a lot of folks out there play pickleball. There's this thing in pickleball called the kitchen, which is like this line, I don't know, not very far back, maybe 8 feet back from the net. And you're not supposed to go across the kitchen line to hit a ball in the air, right? So it's called the no volley zone. And so as a consequence, people get nervous about going up to the kitchen line because you're standing quite close to the net. The ball's coming at you really fast. You're not supposed to cross the line. Like, there's a lot going on. It's a very intimidating place to play. And yet that's really how pickleball is played. You're supposed to be up at the kitchen line and just sort of dive into this kind of fast-paced, aggressive play. But beginning pickleball players like to stay in the back of the court because they want to keep their options open. They're afraid of that fast, intense game with the net. And frankly, they just don't have the experience to know what to do. This is just like our topic today. All right, maybe it's not just like, it's a bit of a stretch, but this is the thing. We are reluctant to get close when we don't know what to do. And so we stay back because we imagine it gives us more options. But the truth is, it just keeps us out of the game. Nothing exciting is going to happen if we're hanging around in the back of the pickleball court. So this is what I believe. For those of you who struggle, particularly those of you who are writing in the third person and you've been advised you've got to get closer, you've got to write from a close third person point of view, you've got to really let the main character sort of drive the bus, even in third person, you may just be experiencing what every pickleball player knows, which is that if you don't know what to do when you get close, you're going to tend to hang back. So I just wanted to start with that little sense of like, if you're confused about this topic, it's not your fault because it's confusing. And if you find yourself even reluctant to do it, it's also quite understandable. Those of you who are writing in the first person, of course, have already made a commitment to voluntarily lock yourselves in that closet made of bone. And it has challenges as well. So I'm going to try to bear both things in mind as I go through this content. All right. And as always, your questions are welcome. So before we can write fluently what's inside a fictional character's head, we have to kind of be curious about what's inside our head. And I just want to say also that this is, truly one of the miraculous qualities of fiction. This is one of the things that most of us find really compelling about fiction, is that it has this ability to allow us creatively to imagine the inside of someone else's head and kind of depict it, to go there, and also to bring our readers to that spot. It's really quite remarkable. So what's inside our heads? There are thoughts. There are a lot of thoughts. There are almost constant thoughts. Anybody who's ever tried a meditation practice where you're just sort of sitting there and saying, I'm just thinking about my breathing. Well, you know how tricky it is to keep the thoughts at bay. And even the thinking about your breathing starts to be thinking about your breathing, right? Like, our brains like to think. Inside our subjective private experience, also there's an emotional content. We are in a mood. Most of us are in a mood. A lot of the time, it may be a lighthearted mood. I'm always in a lighthearted mood when I'm connecting with you guys. It just really makes me feel good. But I'm not always in a lighthearted mood, and I'm sure you're not either. Sometimes we're frustrated. Sometimes our physical condition affects our mood. We're sleepy, we're foggy-headed, you know. Sometimes we're having memories. Sometimes things happen that trigger memories in us, and so our train of thought sort of wanders through the timeline. It goes back, it ruminates, sometimes obsessively, over things that have happened in the past. You all know this is true. Sometimes we get really stuck on things that have happened in the past. We feel defined by them. We keep going back to them. We go into therapy so that we can pay someone to hear us talk about them over and over and over again. This is the stuff that's in our heads. It's kind of a merry-go-round. We don't just think about the past, though. Sometimes we think about the future. Sometimes we think about the future in a way that we call worrying. And worrying is essentially making up negative stories about the future, right? But we're really good at it. We're very prone to do it. Some of us also like to, you know, coax ourselves, or maybe are naturally inclined to make up positive stories about the future. And that's fantastic. That's, you know, sort of casting our vision, making plans, you know, imagining possibilities, forming goals. So our minds are going everywhere. The other place that our minds are going, or maybe this is just me, but I don't think it is toward distraction. Our mind is very easily distracted. If your mind is not easily distracted, would you please post your secret in the comments so that everybody can benefit from it? Most of us are very easily distracted, and we live in a modern world that is filled with distractions. Occasionally we'll be in a flow state. Maybe we'll be hyper focused on something. Some of us have that in our personalities as well, that we will get so hyper focused that it's like being in a tunnel and other things don't even really come into view, even when they should. People talk to us, smoke detectors go off. We don't notice because we're hyper focused on the thing. So all of us have our own like little inner landscape, right? Our consciousness runs on the track that it runs on. But my point is that it is a jumble in there. It's a jumble. And we can be very self-absorbed. And a lot of this stuff that's going on in there is really not interesting to anybody but us. We can also be obsessively interested in others. And that can be a way of distracting ourselves from ourselves, or it can, you know, be a kind of a indicator of us, you know, having poor boundaries, or, you know, whatever, all these things. It's a jumble of stuff in there, and some of it's pretty intense. So that's the first point that I want to make, is that our natural state, our natural inner mental state, is not ready for prime time. Our job as writers is not to try to depict this truthfully or accurately. Just the same way that our job as writers, when writing dialogue, is not to depict dialogue exactly the way people talk in real life. Because in real life, people chatter. They babble, they repeat themselves, they stop and start. They talk to keep themselves company. They talk to their companion to keep a kind of a flow of conversation going. They talk for all kinds of reasons that have nothing to do with what? Storytelling. So I just want to begin by moving you away from any expectation that writing the inner life of your character is supposed to be quote unquote realistic, a realistic depiction. If it were trying to be a more realistic depiction, it would come out like stream of consciousness, right? And I'll throw out the obvious example, James Joyce. Many of us read it either willingly or unwillingly at some point in our educations. It's very hard to read, but I'm going to give you, you know, my opinion, which is that even James Joyce was not trying to depict the stream of consciousness of his characters accurately. He was using the technique of stream of consciousness to tell a story about a character. So that's just a little bit of of context and maybe a little frame for this. What most of us are trying to do when we go into the inner life of our character is to tell story. All right. So, one of the well, let's get started, I think, with my 5 things. Let's get started with the list. So sharpen your pencils for a second. When we are using inner life, we're balancing it with external life. So that's the other thing I wanted to just offer as a little framework. When we, even writing in first person, we're not just depicting consciousness, we're using the mask of a person narrating to tell a story. And a lot of that story, probably most of it, is going to go on in the external world of the story. It's going to happen in the room. It's going to happen at the zoo. It's going to happen, in the yard. It's going to happen in places. It's going to involve other people. So the narrator's job is not just to track their consciousness while the story is unfolding around them. It's actually to be in the thick of the action, to be the one pushing the story forward, to be making the decisions, taking the actions, making the choices, pursuing the goal that the story is about. So that's what I mean by storytelling. And it's true in first person or in third person. In first person, we're going to often have to choose when to toggle back and forth from what I'm thinking as the narrator and what's going on in the outside world. In the third person, you have the additional choice to make of when you toggle from what the main character's thinking, the viewpoint character, what's going on in the outside world of the story. And you also have the option in third person of letting the narrative consciousness of the book kind of take the microphone for a while. Like it can hold the talking stick for a while and be in a slightly different stance toward the events of the book. So it's just got a little extra decision making. But we still have to decide to go in and out. And even in third person, we're going to spend a lot of time in our viewpoint characters' consciousness for the reasons described above. That's where the action is happening. If this is a journey of transformation of the main character, where's that transformation happening? It's not happening down the street. It's happening within them. All right. So let's get to our list. 5 things that you should, and I'm going to say not, and of course there are no hard and fast rules in art. No one's going to give you a ticket for doing this. But these are your things to avoid. And they're also the common pitfalls. So I'm choosing them for a reason. One of the things that I want you to avoid when you're actually inside the consciousness of your main character is having them tell us what you are about to show us. Let me give an example. If you are in the midst of a scene and your main character is having conflict with another character, and your main character thinks to themselves, she made me so mad. I decided to tell her just what I finally thought of her. And then your main character says, I've bit my tongue long enough, Suzanne. I'm going to tell you what I really think of you. Now, this is a very blunt example, but I see writers do this all the time, that they have their main character decide to do something, and then they show their main character doing it. This is always redundant. So this is not a useful application of inner life. Yes, we're going to talk in a minute about what your character can be doing in their inner life, but what they don't need to do is to narrate the decisions and actions that they plan to take that you as a writer are then about to show us. So that's a real easy one. Don't let your main character tell us in their inner life what you're about to show us in their actions, in their external actions. Super simple. That's number 1. Here's number 2 of our list of things not to put, if you can avoid, in your viewpoint character's head. The recapping of information that the reader already knows. It is so easy to do this. Now, you remember my description a minute ago of the jumble that goes on in all of our heads. Accurate, right? If you allow your main character's internal life to be a jumble, an unsorted junk drawer, it's going to be very natural for you to have them ruminate over events of the story that have already happened. Here's the problem. The reader saw those events too. The reader doesn't need to see the rumination if they were there and they saw it already. So there can be a very, very strong desire to keep recapping and recapping material the reader already knows. If there is needed backstory that we don't already know, that's different. But what I'm talking about is the character just can't stop thinking about what's happened. We do this in life all the time. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with you if you do this in life. What I am saying is that in the well-crafted fiction, this is a waste of your reader's time. It's just treading water. Okay? Make sense to everybody? I hope so. All right, that was number 2. Number 3, things not to put in your character's head is one of my absolute favorites. My students are going to laugh because you've heard me say this a lot. Don't create a list of physical symptoms that are designed to express emotion. Now, what do I mean by physical symptoms? I mean their hearts are beating, their breath is coming in short rasps, their stomach is churning, they're shivering, they're covered with goosebumps. Their hair is prickling on their scalps. They're just awash with all of these often quite cliched, alas, physical symptoms. And sometimes there's just 12 of them going on at once, and you really want to call urgent care and see if they can see your character, because clearly something intense is happening. Writers do this all the time. Now, I teach writers not to do this, and sometimes they'll say to me, well, I get that it looks kind of dumb on the page. Like when you reread it, it seems really silly to have all of that stuff. But I'm trying to show, not tell. I'm trying to show what my character's feeling without telling what they're feeling. And I have to tell you quite clearly, with no symptoms at all, that the use of this kind of symbolic shorthand, it's very cliched, it's very soap opera and melodramatic, to try to show your readers what your character's feeling is just as it's just as telling as saying she was so mad. She was so mad she stamped her foot and her blood pressure rose, all this stuff. You don't have to go that far. And there are other ways to show, not tell. And I'm sure there's another live stream on this channel that goes into that more. And I think it's a question that we should revisit as well, because people are always curious about it. But I just want to assure you that going into your main character's head to just have them dwell upon all their medical chart at the moment is not a useful thing to do. It's not helping the reader. It's just quite cliche. Now, if you can come up with a sensation that's original, that's not a cliche, that has some specificity to it, that's another thing. But we'll save that for the list of things to do. Right now, we're still on the list of things to resist doing. All right, so don't fill your character's inner life with physical symptoms. Number 4, this is another one that I see all the time, and I think it's going to surprise some of you. So if you've got questions, please feel free to ask. Number 4 of things not to put in your viewpoint character's head is a ceaseless reflexive reaction to the events of the scene. I call this like the cha-cha of inside, outside, inside, outside. It's like the narration is taking a step into the world of the story, and then it has to take a step back into the character's head to kind of comment on or process what just happened. And then it does that, and then it takes a step back into the scene, and then it takes it retreats back into the character's head so that they can tell us what they thought about what just happened. Then it goes forward into the scene. Then it comes back into the character's head to tell us what they think about what just happened. Now, I hope somebody out there is feeling called out right now, and I don't want anyone to feel bad about this. It's just one of the confusing things about balancing inner life and external events. As soon as I said, I think someone's feeling called out right now, someone put a big heart in the comments next to that. So I think that's pretty fun. So what are we doing? We're trying to balance it. And we're trying to make sure that our main character stays at the heart of the scene, right? I mean, we have good motives. We're very well intentioned. Nobody does these things because they're trying to be bad writers. It's like that's not the reason. We're trying to be good writers. We're trying really hard to be good writers, and that's part of the problem. Because when you do that, when you get sucked into doing that, you are not really trusting your reader to be able to follow the events of the scene. You are saying to the reader, I'm going to tell you how to react to this. I'm going to show you whether this was good news or bad. I'm going to recap it. It's kind of like if you watch a sporting event, I don't know, let's say pickleball, baseball, whatever your sport is. Now we're back in football season. And there's somebody doing that quote unquote instant replay in the booth. That's what you're doing. You're giving the reader a constant instant replay of what just happened, but they saw it for themselves. Now, imagine if you were trying to enjoy the game, and at the end of like every 3 seconds, they stopped and they replayed what just happened. Like, enough already. Could we just watch the game for a little while? If something super important happens, we're going to take a break. We can recap and maybe add new information, but we don't need an instant replay of every second of the game. It is jarring, it's interrupting, and it's frankly annoying. It's just frankly annoying. Okay. So we're going to call this the cha-cha. We can call it the instant replay. You can call it whatever you like when you write it down, but it is frankly boring. It is unnecessary. And quite importantly, it provides a ceaseless interruption to the events of the scene, which does the opposite of what we want to do, which is to draw our readers into the story. We don't want to keep interrupting the story because that pushes them out. Yeah. We trust the intelligence of our reader. We trust their engagement in the story that we're telling, which means that we have to trust the clarity of our own storytelling. So there's a lot of trust involved. Now, I want to just also like put a little asterisk next to this one, because we spoke in a recent live stream about drafting and what constitutes drafting. It's my experience in my own work and in the work of my students that a draft of a scene or a draft of a book may include a lot of this kind of cha-cha of instant replay. Scene moves forward, instant replay, scene moves forward, instant replay. And what I notice there is a writer who's still in draft mode, who's kind of continually like making a little note to self of how this is affecting their main character. And so a lot of that stuff is like the kind of scaffolding that we might include in a draft that we know that we can take out later, and no one will be the wiser. Nothing will be harmed. We can watch the game straight through without having to keep breaking for instant replays, right? So if you're drafting and you find yourself doing this, I just want you to start to label it. Oh, there's the instant replay. Later on, I can take that out. But right now, I want to keep it there so I don't forget what I was thinking. Okay. So just, give yourself a little space about that. So instant replay. And then here's my 5th thing of what not to put in your viewpoint character's head. And then we're going to talk about the 5 things that you can, seek to put in there. All right. So be of good cheer. But this 5th thing is so important. Really, really, really important. The 5th thing that I don't want you to fill your viewpoint character's head with is the passive state. Now, this is really important. So many writers struggle with the idea of an active hero versus a passive hero. This is another whole topic, and there is a whole live stream on the channel about this topic. What happens when we have a passive hero is that the action of the story is moving forward without their participation. They are not the one driving the story forward. Who's driving the story forward? Other characters, coincidences, random events. The author is working really hard sometimes to shove the story forward. And if the author is working that hard, it's a red flag, right? Because the main character is supposed to want something very badly and is continually meeting up with obstacles that they then have to do things to get over, around. Sometimes they'll win. Sometimes they'll be bested by the obstacle and have to regroup and come up with a new strategy. So your main character should be in a continual state of action. Whether their action succeeds or not is another question. But they want something and they're trying to make it happen. They're trying to get to it. They're trying to get to the place. They're trying to, achieve the goal, whatever it is. And so when your inner life, or when your main character's inner life is filled with passivity, it is a huge red flag. And what are the passive states? Well, here they are. They're confusion, their exhaustion, despair, worry, rumination, defeatist thinking. So a lot of the stuff, without making us all sound hopelessly neurotic, a lot of this jumble of the inner life of consciousness is actually fairly passive. It's true that a lot of us will spend our days with our inner life not necessarily being tuned to, I'm Sherlock Holmes and I'm deducing who the murderer is. Like, our inner state is not always in this kind of active engagement. Sometimes it is, but a lot of the times it's just going around on a merry-go-round. So none of that is helpful for your storytelling. So if your main character is in a passive state, it's really something that you need to address. Where's their goal? What's the mission? What are they, where is all of that while your main character is just feeling sorry for themselves? We go into their mind and they're overwhelmed and confused and don't know what to do. Now, I want to, again, another little theory I'm going to stitch onto this number 5 of the 5 things not to put in your viewpoint character's head. Writers default to passive heroes. Why? Because they haven't created enough obstacles in the storytelling to hold the hero back from getting their goal. I mean, maybe they haven't given the hero a goal. That's another problem. But I think a lot of you know that your hero is supposed to want something. The story is supposed to have an objective, right? And yet, inventing all the obstacles that are going to hold your hero back, slow their progress, send them on detours, thwart them, make it hard for them, force them to grow and change is a lot of work, is it not? And so instead of coming up with sufficient forces of opposition, we just give our hero insufficient gas. Like, we don't have them put their foot on the gas because we don't trust the brake. Does that make sense? So I want you to also consider the ways in which a tendency to keep your hero passive, confused, sleepy, unconscious, helpless, all of the passive states that they might be in internally, stuck in a rut, indecisive. Like, you can come up with a lot of traits, right? Maybe a symptom or a way of coping, like a desperate and kind of ill-advised but well-intended way of coping with the fact that you haven't created the obstacles that are going to hold them back. Because if you don't have obstacles and the hero says, you know what? I'm Dorothy Gale. I'm stuck here in Oz and I'd really like to go home to Kansas. And she can go to the Oz train station, buy a ticket to Kansas and go home. Our story's over in 2 minutes. It's all about obstacles. All right. So passivity is not the cure, but it can be a symptom. All right. Those are the 5 things not to let your viewpoint character's head be full of. All right. Let me just quickly recap. Now we're going to go to the 5 things that I know you're dying to hear, which which is what we want them to be full of. But what we don't want it to be full of is telling us what you're about to show us, recapping material that we, the reader, already know. Maybe we even saw it for ourselves. Physical symptoms that are cliched and excessive and really, in a sense, a cheating way to try to tell us what the character's feeling, because apparently we're not smart enough to figure out ourselves, right? Easy on the physical symptoms. Number 4 was this instant replay. We'll call it the instant replay, this reflexive reaction to every event of the scene, like doing a cha-cha inside and outside. We'll call it the instant replay. I like that one. And 5th, the passive state. That's not what we want to fill our main character's head with. All right, 5 things to do instead. One of the beautiful qualities of fiction is this capacity to imagine ourselves into somebody else's perceptions and observations, their subjective experience. And so one of the things that you can fill your main character's head with are perceptions and observations. But not just any perceptions and observations, right? Perceptions and observations that reveal the story and that reveal character. Now, there's a lot that one could say about this, but I just I want to maybe bring back a reference to a book whose title I might have a little bit wrong. I think it's called Walking with Experts, or Walks with Experts. And basically, it's just a reminder that if we are a microbiologist and we take a walk around the local park, or we're a botanist, or somebody who's really interested in the natural world, our experience of walking through the local park is going to be very different than our friend who's taking the walk with us, who happens to be an architect. The architect is going to see things, notice things, be interested in things in a different way than the biologist or the botanist is going to see, notice, and be interested in. Hopefully they're best friends and they'll have a great conversation and expand each other's way of looking. And isn't that part of the joy of reading fiction, right? So just know that the perceptions and observations of your main character are never generic. They are always rising from the specificity of who that person is, not just in general, but who they are at that moment in the story, right? Because if they're on a journey of transformation, at every moment of the story, they're going to be slightly different. So by accurately tracking how they perceive and observe the world that they're in, we will also get reminded of how they, where they're at their journey. Think about how Ebenezer Scrooge perceives the world at the beginning of A Christmas Carol versus how he perceives it at the end, right? He sees a giant goose in the butcher's window at the beginning of the story, and he might think, what a waste, but at the end he thinks, oh no, that could feed Tiny Tim's whole family, right? The way we perceive and observe changes depending on who we are and where we are in our development. So use that in your character's inner life. Okay, the perceptions and observations are terrific tools for reminding us what they're like and where they are in their current state of development. Here, Anne has corrected me. Let me throw it in right now. This is exactly the book. Walks with Expert Eyes. I wasn't even close. So Anne, thank you for checking that. On Looking, 11 Walks with Expert Eyes. It's a really fun book. You can go ahead and read it. But if you don't want to go ahead and read it, the point is that expert eyes will each see the world according to who they are. Thank you so much, Anne. It's super helpful. All right, that was number 1. The second thing that you can put more of in your viewpoint character's head are sensory details that bring the scene to life. Now, what are the 5 senses? You know what they are. There's sight, there's taste, there's hearing, there's smell, there's touch. Those are the details that actually make the scene vivid. If a character walks into a room and says, oh, it was the most beautiful room I ever saw, well, I don't know what to imagine. But if the character walks into the room and, is dazzled by the gleam of the burnished wood banisters and the feel of the plush carpet beneath her feet, and and the gentle hum of the ceiling fan. And, oh, wow. Like we start to actually be in the room. It's because of the five senses that happens. Now, when we're telling a story, whose five senses are the gateways to that information? Aha, this is why it's so fun to be inside our close viewpoint of our main character. The sensory experience is experienced internally, even though it's coming in through the gates of the senses, but it's processed in the brain. So when you're in your character's consciousness, it's a great opportunity to feed sensory detail into the story. Your reader will love you for it. Okay. Now, again, it needs to be concrete and specific and connected to one of the five senses. Adjectives are not going to cut it. It was a terrible smell, sort of tells me it was a terrible smell. But if you describe what it smells like, make me go, ooh, give me some concrete and specific stuff. And once again, just as in perceptions and observations, even sensory detail is inflected with the viewpoint character's personality, the mood that they're in, their state, where they are in the story, who are they in this moment of the storytelling, what feels good on my skin at one moment might be irritating at another moment if I'm in a bad mood, right? Sometimes somebody goes to touch you and you're like, oh, thanks for the pat. Sometimes someone goes to touch you and you flinch, like, not right now, I'm not in the mood, right? So you have to understand that even the senses are not generic, they're not objective. Nothing that happens inside the consciousness of your main character is generic ever. So let's go for those concrete, specific sensory details, but it also inflect them with the particularity of your character. And where better to do that but in your character's consciousness? So that was number 2. Number 1 was perceptions and observations. 2, sensory details. 3 is one of my favorites, and it directly speaks to that passivity problem we talked about a minute ago. I call this cognitive action. So instead of sitting there saying, I keep thinking, I'm going around in circles, I don't know what to do, I keep thinking about what happened, use your character's consciousness to problem solve, to deductive reasoning is a great thing. You can have them making decisions, evaluating options, analyzing the situation as they now understand it based on what just happened, right? Making the strategy for what to do next, drawing conclusions from those perceptions and observations, making plans, right? So in the realm of consciousness, a lot of storytelling can happen. A lot of active storytelling can happen. If they're going to have some kind of replay of what's already had, let it be for a purpose. We're sifting for clues. We're looking for insight. We're trying to make a strategy. So your hero is very likely to be doing a lot of that kind of action, that forward-leaning action. Plenty of it throughout your storytelling. So don't be shy about showing it. That's really good stuff to put inside. And here's another one. Here's number 4. And I mentioned this earlier, how much time we spend thinking about the past. And so memories are a really useful thing to put in your viewpoint character's head if they are impacting the story in the present. So you don't give your main character just kind of a break to just remember the day that they went on a picnic with grandma when they were 8 and then do a 2-page flashback and then come back to the main action. If it's not pertinent, if it's not relevant to the main thrust of the action, we don't need that flashback. The question is, how does that memory inform the present moment? Now, I'm going to give 2 examples that I really love, because a lot of times in a story, our hero is like in the throes of grappling with the obstacle, right? And sometimes those obstacles come at them from the outside. Sometimes like a fear or, what we call a threshold guardian archetype is activated within the hero. and they're just really trying to decide, like, am I up to the task? Am I ready for this? It's making me feel like reluctant. And often a little dose of mentor energy is what is needed to get over these little humps. And we see this a lot in storytelling. We see the utility of mentor energy for the hero over and over again. And so many of us in our lives have mentor energy in our past that we can draw upon, that we can actually remember the good advice that we got, the person in our lives who had confidence in us, who gave us, that Yoda moment, that Gandalf moment, right? And there's a great example that my students know in the Kipling story called Rikki Tikki Tavi, where our little mongoose, who's washed out of his burrow, he's kind of a baby mongoose. He's still living at home in the burrow, and he's washed out by a flood, and he ends up in a garden. And in the garden are a pair of cobras. And Ricky knows, because it's the legend of his family and his mongoose, tribe, his mongoose legacy, that a mongoose's job in life is to catch and kill cobras. And the very first time that he sees an actual cobra, he's scared because he's little and the cobra's enormous and it's terrifying and it rises up and it spreads its hood and he is just scared, as any of us would be. But then he remembers, and Kipling does this in a not even a whole sentence, in a phrase of a sentence. He remembers that his mother fed him the meat of dead cobras when he was a baby and taught him that this was his destiny in life. And then he wasn't afraid anymore. And he looks up at that cobra and he starts, talking smack, and they get into it, right? It's a great scene. But this moment, this little twist of what his memory does for him, is not random. It's exactly what is needed at that moment of the storytelling to help our hero rise to this amazing new obstacle that's literally looming over him. Now, you may say, well, why does he need that? If we're on a journey of transformation with our hero, don't we want to see those moments when the wheel of change happens? Like, that was like a little crank of the wheel of transformation. In one moment, Ricky's like a baby who's never seen an actual cobra before, and the sight of one makes him like quake in his little mongoose boots. But then he summons a little dose of mentor energy from his memory. Moms can be great mentors, and that changes him. And before our eyes, he changes from the mongoose who's never seen a cobra before and is scared, to a little guy who knows, like, all right, well, there's always a first time. Let me deal with this. Let me deal with the snake. Let me deal with it. Now, it's amazing. It's thrilling. It's these moments of transformation that actually make readers really excited. So this is the correct use of memory in storytelling. And where do memories happen? Inside the main character's head. Okay, so this is a tremendously useful way to use memory. And now my fifth and last piece of guidance about what you should put in your viewpoint character's head is, guess what? Nothing. Don't go in there. Skip the instant replay completely. It's not necessary. You can have what's going on in your main character's inner life shown, not told, in your storytelling by a wide range of tools that are not doing the cha-cha back into their consciousness. You can have them do something physical. There can be a piece of physical behavior or a gesture. You can have them say something, use dialogue. You can keep the scene moving forward through things that are visible to the eye. Keep it in the external world and skip the instant replay altogether. Now, I want to offer some wisdom from acting class. As many of you know, if you've been watching the channel or you know me, I started as a young person in the theater. I was actually a theater major when I entered college. And I had a little career in the theater in my 20s. And this is a piece of acting class wisdom, which is to act on the lines, not in between. And if you think about it, just imagine again, I hate to kind of be beating up on soap operas all the time, but if you sort of bad soap opera acting, like something upsetting happens and somebody makes a face and glass and goes through some kind of like melodramatic thing and then says, I can't believe it. And so everything is like twice. It's like it's literally like the telling what you're about to show us note. And it's in acting class, they always said act on the lines, not in between. You don't have to have your whole emotional reaction and then say the line. The emotional reaction is supposed to be what you're feeling as you say the line. Like just keep it going. Otherwise the plays become twice as long. So it's this principle, you don't need to go into your main character's head as often as you think. If you keep them behaving and acting in the world of the scene. Now, some writers have a tendency to go into their characters' inner lives way too much. And those are the ones who are kind of addicted to the instant replay, and they will learn not to. If you happen to be one of the, in my experience, rarer writers that can barely bring yourself to go into your main character's inner life, this advice is not for you. But I trust you now, as you've often heard me say, to know your tendencies about this. If you are like the pickleball player who's afraid to go up to the net because you don't know what to do once you get there, if that's you, what I want you to do is focus on the 4 things that I'm encouraging you to do. Let's go back over them. Give us those perceptions and observations that reveal character and story. Give us sensory detail that brings the scene to life and also reveals character and story. Let us see cognitive action. Let us see your hero's inner life actually trying to solve things, to move the story forward, to figure out what's going on and what to do next. Let memory serve a specific storytelling purpose when it can, when it's appropriate, right? When a piece of needed information or backstory is what your hero needs to move forward. All right. Focus on those things. And once you do that, you won't be so afraid to go up to the net, to get close, to dive into your hero's inner life. Okay. So that's for those of you that are reluctant. I think more of you are going to be likely to be kind of going in there maybe too often and get a little lost and sort of doing the things on our list of 5, our little hall of shame, our 5 things that we don't want to be doing. All right, that's my guidance for today. I'm going to take a moment to look at some of the comments. If anybody has questions about this topic, now is the time to ask them, so that there's usually just a couple of seconds lag before they pop up on my screen. So let me encourage you to put them in. Nancy is astute when she says that she can see how ceaseless reaction can stop the fictional dream. Exactly. And also, I feel validated by this instant replay. That's what we're going to call it from on now, Nancy. That phrase like rang a bell with you. Fantastic. And Anne's got a comment and says, that she understands my point about not wanting the hero to passively ruminate, and shares that she's worked so hard on that in her own journey. Action and moving forward is better for everyone. It's better for the hero, right? It's better for your fictional character if they're ever going to achieve their goal. It's better for you as a writer because it means that you're not going to get stuck in the swamp of like a second act that just kind of goes nowhere, which so many writers do, and this is why. But the person who it's best for, you know who it is, Anne. It's best for the reader, isn't it? Because we don't want to read stories where our main character is just sitting there going, all these things keep happening and I don't know why. Am I supposed to do something about it? No. Like, dude, you're the hero of the story. If not you, then who? Okay. I'm so pleased to talk about this topic with you. I hope it was of benefit. If you think of questions or comments later, don't be shy. Leave them in the comments below the video. I will respond to them. I love to hear what you're thinking. If you are new to this channel, I do ask you to subscribe to it. If you like the content of this video, give it a thumbs up. It really helps YouTube know that the content is valuable and they should be showing it to more people, which I would love. Let's get more storytellers thinking about how to be better writers, especially, as I say, with NaNoWriMo coming up. I really, really, really want to give some tools in advance so that those of you who are going to do this just can go in there and feel confident that you're not, generating a lot of words in a month is not nothing, but it's not the same thing as having a workable draft of a book that you can then revise and develop. If you want a little preparation, if you want a little guidance about this, please take advantage of the writing prompts. It's a freebie. All you got to do is go to that link, pathofthestoryteller.com/challenge. You'll download a workbook. It's got 30 writing prompts in it, and you can do them, and you'll be shocked and amazed, I think, at how much material you're going to get. You won't necessarily have written a book, but you will have thought your way through the entire storytelling, and you'll have tons and tons of ideas, and it's going to set you up for success when you actually do sit down to write a draft. Okay, please take advantage. Thank you all, as ever, for coming along on this journey for me. I imagine it's put some interesting things in your heads. I look forward to seeing you next time. If you've got requests for topics that you want me to talk about in a future live stream, just let me know. I'll see you then.